Hello, my name is Brendan. I'll be starting off this presentation on racial disparity. For those of you that do not know what that is, in the criminal justice system, it is the proportion of a racial/ethnic group within the control of the system is greater than the proportion of such groups in the general population. So I'll be starting off with some statistics. In 1998 through 1997, the rate of deaths from legal intervention with police among black males over 10 years old was 3 times greater than white, found by Sikora and Mulheeville. And then fast forward to 2009 through 2012, across 17 states, it was found that mortality rates were 2.8 times higher among black individuals than white, according to the National Violent Death Reporting. And then in 2013, Crosby and Lyons observed a 4-fold higher rate of legal intervention deaths among black men compared to white. Now, with all that news, there's a lot of reactions that could be had. There could be anger with riots and protests. There could be questions as to why is this happening. The main thing we need to look on is alternatives to facing these violent and sometimes fatal interventions with the police. I'm going to hand it off to Ian now, and he's going to say his part.
Now we will look into the relationship between education and racial disparities in the criminal justice system. When talking about racial disparities in America, it is almost impossible to leave education out of the discussion. According to Christopher Ingram of the Washington Post, the rise in the institutionalized population among black men without a high school diploma has been even more dramatic than the years before. By 2010, nearly a third of black male high school dropouts aged 25 to 29 were imprisoned or otherwise institutionalized. There is a direct correlation between a high school diploma and incarceration. The Bureau of Justice Statistics released a stat saying 68% of their state prison inmates did not receive their GED. Eleanor Roosevelt, an American politician and First Lady, strongly believed in education. She went on to conclude that education is essential to good citizenship and how to contribute to your community. It's evident that people who are incarcerated lack the qualities of a model citizen. In order to break this cycle, we must put more emphasis on the power of knowledge amongst our youth in urban areas. Education provides a sense of purpose. It opens up many opportunities and has endless benefits. No matter how you think about it, knowledge is the key to living a sound and harmonic lifestyle. Now, Sydney.
Like we've previously mentioned, racial disparity in the justice system is especially prevalent in jails and prisons. The Sentencing Project is an organization that looks closely at these issues and works for a fair and effective U.S. criminal justice system by promoting reforms in the sentencing policy, addressing unjust racial disparities, and providing alternatives to our incarceration. According to the Sentencing Project, rates between African Americans, Hispanics, and Caucasians in state prisons are highly disproportional. Around the world, prison rates have been declining from 20 to 30%. However, in America, it has the highest incarceration rate in the world. In fact, over the past 40 years, the U.S. jail and prison population rate has increased 500%, and the racial disparity within them are high. It is so disproportional that 1 in 3 black men born in 2001 can expect to go to prison in their lifetime. For Latino men, it is 1 in 6. Looking at the average state rates of incarceration, we see that overall, blacks are incarcerated at a rate at 1,408 per 100,000, while whites are incarcerated at a rate of 275 per 100,000. This means that blacks are incarcerated at a rate that is 5.1 times greater than whites. Also, on any given day, 1 in every 10 black males in his 30s is in a prison or jail. These statistics are shocking and could be due to individual or institutional racism or even more legitimate reasons. However, there is no denying that the gaps in our justice system need to be closed so we can have a more fair and unbiased sentencing structure. Now here's more on sentencing and racial disparities.
Over the past 3 decades, the U.S. prison population has skyrocketed, with 6 times as many people in prison today as in 1972. African Americans make up 30% of America's population, but are 60% of incarcerated population. Deva Peger, author of American Journal of Sociology, published in 2003, did a study on criminal records and jobs. She sent white males with a criminal record and black males with a criminal record in to apply for jobs. The study found the interviewer was most likely to call a white male with a criminal record than a black man. Studies by AmericanProgress.com shows that spending time in prison affects wage trajectories with a disproportionate impact on black men and women. The results show no evidence of racial divergence in wages prior to incarceration. However, following release from prison, wages grow at a 21% slower rate for black former inmates compared to white ex-convicts. Now I'll hand it over to Lauren.
Studies have found that greater racial disparities exist in sentencing for nonviolent crimes, especially property crimes and drug offenses. African American and Latino offenders sentenced in state and federal courts face significantly greater odds of incarceration than equally situated white offenders and receive longer sentences than their white counterparts in some jurisdictions. Although African Americans make up only about 13% of the U.S. population, they are the ones who are serving the most. 56.4% of those serving life without parole and 56.1% of those who received life without parole for offenses committed as a juvenile are African American. The ACLU estimates that nationwide 65.4% of prisoners serving life without parole for nonviolent offenses are black, 17.8% are white, and 15.7% are Latino. In Louisiana, 91.4% of the nonviolent life without parole prisoners are black. Race matters at all phases and aspects of the criminal process, including the quality of representation, the charging phase, and the availability of plea arguments, each of which impact whether juvenile and adult defendants face a potential life without parole sentencing. Now here's Brian.
Incarceration has become a staple in the life cycle of so many racial and ethnic minorities. Today there are disproportionate rates of incarceration in communities of color. These facts represent the future for the children growing up presently. Based on the system, in many situations, blacks are more likely to receive worse punishments than white people for the same offense. For example, there are more black people in urban areas than white people. The punishment for a drug offense within a certain distance of a school is more severe than one that's not. This means if they commit a crime, their punishment would be harsher because they tend to live in areas closer to schools, as it's more densely populated than suburban and rural areas. Even though efforts have been addressed to fix these problems, they still occur on every level of the criminal justice system. Many police agencies have instituted training to prevent and identify this, yet it continues. In the area of law enforcement, it is known that racial profiling is still evident and common. For instance, drugs are the leading factor to the disproportionate rates of incarceration. Disparities in the criminal justice system itself are part of the interrelationship between race and class, which are parallel to how black people are at a disadvantage. Steps to even out the playing field can be taken if all levels of the criminal justice system step up in the effort to do so. Federal and state policy initiatives can aid in moving toward equality by promoting the same access to all people for justice. This would include defense services for all people, no matter their race, as well as broad availability of community-based sentencing options. All in all, the criminal justice system is skewed in the wrong direction for black people, and things need to change to make equality for all. And I'll throw it off to Nick.
According to recent studies, black drivers are 31% more likely to be pulled over than whites. They are more than twice as likely to be subject to...
And now I'll throw it off to Nick.
According to recent studies, black drivers are 31% more likely to be pulled over than whites. They are more than twice as likely to be subject to police searches as white drivers, and they are nearly twice as likely to not be given any reason for the traffic stop, period. Nationally, blacks are 3.5 times more likely to be in jail than whites. And in New Hampshire, blacks are 5 times more likely to be in jail, and in Hillsborough County, the most populous and diverse county in the state, they are nearly 6 times more likely to be in jail than whites. Also, police arrest black Americans for drug crimes at twice the rate of whites, according to federal data, despite the fact that whites use drugs at comparable rates and sell drugs at comparable or even higher rates. The same study in New York found that black defendants are even more likely to be offered plea deals that include prison time than whites or non-black minorities. Even after controlling for many factors, including the seriousness of charges and prior record, blacks were 13% more likely than whites to be offered such deals. In 2012, a working paper found robust evidence that black male federal defendants were given longer sentences than comparable whites. Black men's sentences were, on average, 10% longer than those of their white peers. This is partially explained by the fact that prosecutors are about twice as likely to file charges against blacks that carry mandatory minimum sentences than against whites. Lastly, U.S. states restrict the voting rights of citizens convicted of crimes, and since black Americans are overrepresented in the criminal justice system, voter disenfranchisement has a disproportionate effect on the black population. That's all we have for you.